started with the Middle Ages, because 6th grade ends with the fall of Rome. So we start with like the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages. Then we move into the Golden Age of Islam. We learn about Islam, and then after that, we move into the Renaissance. And then we did a whole unit on Shakespeare.
So pretty much what we used up our like first semester to have in U.S. history about.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Well, you know, part of what we're doing is it's difficult with something like history because history is really driven by this timeline, you know? It's driven by being stuck in time. And you want to get a sense of time periods, but it doesn't have to be. So we're trying to liberate it from that.
Well, and the other thing about history is that so much of it has traditionally been taught by who was fighting and who won the wars, and the political, who has the political power.
Picture.
Well, yeah.
But is that the big picture? That's
It's
just
one aspect
of the entire thing.
And I didn't get interested in history until I got interested in how people lived. Like, what's actually happening? What's their day-to-day life?
Yeah.
What are they actually doing? And so many of them, they're not out fighting wars. They're digging in the dirt, man. They're subsisting. They're like trying to get their next meal on. You know, like, what are they going to eat? And recognizing how little grain there is. I mean, back in the Middle Ages, they ate rye. That was it.
Right.
They had rye. And the rye grain, it was, you planted one seed, you were lucky if you got back 3. And so you had to save a third of what you a third of what your crop in order to eat next year. That's unbelievable. And I think kids knowing that can understand what subsistence really is about. And you didn't have a whole lot of chickens, and chickens come much later.
In 1930s, like the seed, I think.
What?
Like the chickens started like getting bigger.
Well, the chickens start in Southeast Asia. They start where your ancestors come from. That's where the chickens come from, and the chickens start getting bigger way back when. But they slowly move this way. The pigs were in Asia too, and they slowly moved this way. They had pigs by that time, but that kind of we're looking at that. I want to look at that food. Like, what were they really eating? What was important to them? What did they care about? And the stuff like, what happened? What were the inventions?
That gives you a better sense of like the wars too.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Why they happened, not just, that happened.
why they happened and like the
Exactly.
supplies they had for it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's exactly right. How they built their towns, why there were walls around them, how big they really were. We think of Paris as huge. Paris was the Ile de Cité, which is a little tiny island in the middle of the Seine. It was not Paris. And I want them to get that, to see that. What does that actually mean? And talk about building. And, I was putting down some stuff. So, the inventions in medicine that happened throughout the Middle Ages, but also the building. Because the Gothic cathedrals are the biggest buildings that were built, and they were built in the in the 1200s and 1300s, and they're the biggest buildings that happened until the advent of the elevator in the 19th century, in the late 19th century. So you've got this domination of the church for all those hundreds of years. Absolute domination. And that's pretty remarkable. That kind of thing. And optics. What happens with the optics? And anatomy. When we get into the Renaissance, the whole anatomy and Leonardo da Vinci and, working in the basement, hiding from the church, doing his anatomy studies. I think that's really interesting. So there's a lot of science, but so you don't get stuck. So you sort of do a leapfrog in time. You're not doing this
Step-by-step thing.
Yeah, but you're picking 4 or 5 really big issues that happen and really delving into them much more deeply.
So, and what are the issues, do you think? Have you settled on your issues?
Some of them, I think the Columbian Exchange is huge. That the whole Golden Age of Islam, what happens with that, because that in
Pretty sure most people don't even know like exactly what Islam is.
right, that's exactly right. They don't know what Islam is.
Yeah.
Right, the culture, that whole cultural triangle that happens in southern Italy and northern Africa, that's the hotbed. I mean, that's where algebra comes. So, I mean, we're starting them with they're doing the whole pre-algebra, but even knowing where they're headed and why it was important, the invention of the zero happens at this time. You know, that idea of nothing. What is nothing?
Zero was invented.
I know, isn't that wild? I know, well, you know, it is.
Wait, the Romans didn't invent zero?
No, they had no idea what zero
They
was.
really had one.
They had one, that was it.
Yeah.
But they had no zero, so they had no placeholder.
I think in Africa, the San people, or like the Bushmen,
Mm-hmm.
they have a word for zero.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's a new word or if it's
Yeah.
a word that they've been using for a long time. They're considered the first humans, or like the oldest ancestors.
Right,
They did all the DNA, and they found that theirs is the first, most rudimentary form of DNA before it starts mutating and changing, and people start evolving because of where they live around the world.
So it spreads out from them. Yeah, exactly. Which is also a cool thing to talk about.
Yeah.
Right.
So
There's some certain concepts, but are there like certain questions that you're coming back to again and again?
I think that question that we came up with about the Columbia Exchange.
cultures clashing? Or?
At what price
At what
progress?
At what price progress? Because all those things that we're looking at are progressive. You know, the idea, the whole how their food improved. Like they go from subsistence into, you know, eating well enough that they could actually
Sell it.
sell it. Yeah, exactly. And that they could start having a mercantile class, because you can actually have enough people who have enough food that they don't have to be out there in the fields
Yeah.
working it all the time. They
So-
can actually be doing something else.
So, and how an economy
How an economy is
Develops.
based on, yeah, exactly. So the development of the economy from this idea of past subsistence, and what happens from that, and then you can develop folks that spend time tinkering. You can have a Johnny Tran, because you can have somebody that wants to build things all the time, because he doesn't have to be out in the field all the time, right? So having that allows development of ideas and inventions and that sort of thing. And then we get into this, okay, so now we have better this, we have better that. Now
But
we can,
people are dying.
but
Right.
people are dying, and what does that mean?
And another thing that we're really looking at is this idea of a global, you know, how a sense of what does it mean to be a global citizen? What does it mean to be, you know, part of a contributor to the world? And
Exactly.
you know, our history is really the history of the world now, because everything is starting to blend together. So, you know, we're looking at that as well, and how do we maintain our relationships and connections with people throughout the world in a way where the exchange is fair.
Well, and I think that exchange piece comes really interestingly in that you can talk about the Silk Road, and you can talk about that.
You want to tell them what the Silk Road
The
is?
Silk Road was
Yeah, the Marco Polo thing.
Marco Polo, and yes, and the exchange back and forth, you know, over land as opposed to over sea. And then that rich interchange in northern Morocco and northern
Spain?
Africa. Spain, yeah, the Spain.
In Morocco.
Yeah.
Gibraltar.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they go back and forth all the time, and the Arabs and the Christians were actually doing really well there for a while, and it wasn't until, you know, the Christians decided.
The Crusades.
The Crusades, yeah, right, exactly. So yeah, it's just sort of interesting, and then the Columbian Exchange. So you have all these different places where you can talk about globalization and movement in and out and exchange of ideas.
Anyway, so you guys keep thinking about those things.
I have
If-
a question for the bigger one. It's gonna be to where everything relates all year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to develop so their project is to develop a whole curriculum based on this idea.
Yeah.
I think that would be good in a way because it's kind of like if you don't understand this.
You don't understand in another class because you're going to be going
Yeah,
somewhat over
because
that in another
because
class.
right now how it is for us, it's like or how it's been after. Well,
Switch gears. One period
Yeah.
of math, next period of English. And
it's like okay, so stop thinking about this.
Right.
Stop thinking about this, and
Exactly.
this way it's gonna be like okay, so if I don't understand this, test over this. Oh man.
But my challenge for you is to think about what about this excites you about what do you think is going to encourage learning? That's our goal, to encourage learning, to get people excited like they were excited about you guys working on the asteroid project. That's going to be my gold standard from now on. But also I want you to poke holes in this. I want you to say, that doesn't sound like that'll work to me. Or that sounds like something a teacher would come up with, but I don't like it. I mean, I really want you to be honest about things like that.
Well, I was
Well, a
thinking
student might
about
get
that.
restless.
I really don't understand how math is going to fit into this.
I don't really
Like,
understand.
I don't know what they teach in
how you
pre-algebra,
understand
but
this
I-
issue.
Especially grammar too. I'm thinking about that.
Well, like language arts, I assume you could give them sentences that are related to whatever they're learning in history, but I just don't understand how math fits into this because, I mean, sure, if you're teaching in kindergarten how to do it, you can go ahead and teach them, how they trade and whatnot, but
So it's
other than
kinda like
currency
they have
exchange.
But science has a lot of things to do with.
Well, science does, but not really like pre-algebra, because think about it, pre-algebra is more like, learning how to evaluate X and whatnot, right?
I think maybe they can just put like, okay, X amount of people had diseases this year. How many would they have this year? You know?
Well, it's exponential.
Yeah.
She's back to the diseases again. Okay, so anyway, we don't have to answer all those questions now, but that's a
But
good
those are very
start. That's a
helpful.
good place
That's
to
right. That's exactly
start.
right. That's the kind of thing
Thank
we're
you.
thinking